is he really mean like that in real life? And you know, and then I would be playing soccer and he'd be on the field like shouting and screaming, and people would think that it was really, you know, John Kreese coming out, but it was really just my dad.
Please welcome in from Cobra Kai, Martin Kove and Jessie Kove.
How you doing?
Excellent. Even better now. Have a seat.
It's a long walk, sorry.
You'd fight a few people along the way.
It is a Saturday at Terrificon, so this is the day that things just sort of blow up. So we're glad you both could be here today. Look, I know we've got a lot of Cobra Kai questions. I know we're going to be talking about Karate Kid. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. I do have to ask you, this is a comic book convention, a comic book and pop culture convention. Did I read, you have your own comic book?
Yeah, quite tell people.
We do. We have a Western comic book called Prodigal Sun that we came up with. It was originally my dad's idea. He is in love with the Western, and it's a really dark, gritty Western. We're actually developing into a series as well.
Okay.
So
that's what I wanted to ask. So the Kickstarter, I'm like, they have their own comic book. This is like the coolest thing ever. So, and like I was looking at the cover. The cover, it's like you, right? Is it pretty close to you or ish?
Yeah.
Cove-ish. We can go. All right, so it's a 4-part comic book. People can support it. I think there's a Kickstarter that's out there too. They can support all the different projects.
Yeah, but they go to thundercomics.com. We debuted it at the New York Comic Con last summer.
Yes.
And they're still writing the rest of the other comics as well. But yeah, if you go to thundercomics.com, you guys can check it out, Prodigal Sun.
And this is something, like you said, you're developing into a series. So how far along is that process? Or can you tell us about that?
Well, there are three comic books are completed now. One more will be done. The artwork is what takes so long.
Yeah.
And it's a story of a 12-year-old boy and an old gunfighter who bond together and have an exchange of moral values. And they're after, you know, this common enemy who is played by my son, Jesse. And it's a story really about heroes. It's about kids, because I don't think kids have heroes today, and they don't have, like, you know, Eastwood or John Wayne or anybody that we had. And back in the 60s, when all the Westerns were popular, there were 35 Westerns on primetime TV. And the kids could choose any hero they wanted to, whether it's the Rifleman, Maverick, you know, Cheyenne, any of those shows. And now they're not there, you know. And even though Taylor Sheridan's writing some really good Westerns for TV, the characters are all, you know, they have a lot of angst. You know, they're always, unfortunately, they're all frustrated with their lives. So I think that creating heroes for kids, whether they emulate my character or they emulate the 12-year-old boy, that it'll be a wonderful legacy to create.
So this is sort of a throwback then to these sort of older Westerns that we loved, that were on TV and in movie theaters and that.
Yeah.
And this was an original idea of yours, right? This is something that's been kicking around. How long has that been kicking around that you wanted to get that out? And then what did you think when you first saw the artwork coming in?
Well, I love the artwork, and what happened was Jesse arranged a party from the MMA wanted to come to the house and do a party, and because it was the finals of the MMA and they thought it was appropriate. It was a press situation, and so at the house in Los Angeles, the writer came up to me, a man named Don Hanfield. And he said, "I hear you want to do this." And I said, "Yeah." And he was introduced to me by my manager, and he did I wrote all the broad strokes for the story, all 4 issues.
Oh, wow.
And he created them created the dialogue and hired the artist, and it's brilliant. Wow. It's really brilliant. And I think it's easier to sell a series to Netflix or Prime Video or whoever. You have 4 comic books, you put it down and you say, this is how I want to mount this and what it's going to look like as a movie or a TV show. Because they can open up the book and see this great artwork.
It's storyboarded already. Everything's out there for them. So, and Jesse, you get to play a Western bad guy.
He's really evil, this guy, but I kind of joke around that playing villains runs in the family, so we kind of step into those shoes pretty well.
This is, okay, so before you guys got here, we were chatting about some different things, because I love the projects that you guys get to team up on, too. So speaking about going against type on things, too, you have the Hallmark movie, that you could talk a little bit about that, and then, I mean, these roles are just like, this is something we've never seen you in before, and then I think it's you had mentioned too that it's the role that your son has that you've always wanted to have, and now you get to see him play it. So tell us a little bit about this cool Hallmark movie that you guys have.
But we're always fighting for each other's parts, I think, some form or another.
He wants to be the romantic lead in this one.
Right, exactly. Okay. I end up bullying John Kreese. It works out. So we did a movie called The Taste of Love. We shot in Florida, and my dad had just finished, I think it was season 4 or 5, and he wanted to step into something a little more calm, and so we did this great movie with Aaron Cahill, and we just had this great time. We shot in Dunedin, Florida, and for us it was so fun. We love working together, so it was so nice for us to kind of step into the different shoes. Instead of fighting people, we were making Christmas cookies and being nice and romantic with our love interests, and it was a nice change for us. And we love doing films for like Hallmark and that kind of stuff. Just have a change of pace, and it's a really, really fun movie to see a different side of my dad. Looking for he always likes to see a little more of the vulnerability side, which you may get a taste for in season 6. I can't say anything else about that, but yeah.
Okay, that's that's fine. You can tell us as much as you can about season 6 of Cobra Kai too. So, I want to ask Martin, how you originally got into acting. So, born in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Okay. So, when did the interest in acting first come in for you?
We did a play, The Golden Goose. And The Golden Goose was in the 4th grade in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
And I just liked it so much and just did a play every year in high school and all. And eventually, I remember I was a stand-in for Sean Connery in the Anderson Tapes, a movie, one of the first jobs I ever had. And I remember being accepted to the NYU School of the Arts in the graduate school. And I was also at the same time accepted to a repertory, classical repertory in New York City. I had done a little bit of Lincoln Center and all, but these were 2 really important decisions to make. Do I want to go back to school and continue education in theater arts, or do I want to go out and gamble my life and just walk around with a portfolio and be an actor? So I went to Sean Connery and I told him that, and we were friends because I was standing in for him. It was like a glorified extra, just stand in front of the camera and line up the shot. And he said to me, I told him what the dilemma was, and he said, "Young man, if you can do Antigone, you can do anything." Meaning, if you can do the Greek classics, if you go to repertory, nice, you'll be able to handle TV, movies, whatever.
Wow.
And it was very good advice. It was enough time to stop going to school. It was the right time to stop going to school. And just, and Jesse did the same thing. Jesse was able to, he grabbed a play when he was 18 about Columbine, and they took this play in Los Angeles. It's something I'd always wanted to happen to me. They take a play from Los Angeles and they go and do it off-Broadway. And he's 18.
Wow.
Funny story. My dad would audition for plays in other schools that he didn't even attend the school. And he would get the parts. And they'd be like, "Do you go to school here?" I'm like, "Yeah. Yes, I do."
There were a lot of stories like that. Because I was in a college that didn't have a really good theater department initially. And I would go to places like Hofstra University or a variety of different schools, and I auditioned for their plays, and I was not in attendance in the school. And sometimes you get busted, and sometimes not.
Worth the risk. Worth the risk, though.
It was worth the risk because those departments were terrific.
Yeah.
But they were very cliquey. So I remember getting a part in Heartbreak House by George Bernard Shaw, and it was the lead. and nobody knew who I was. And it was like the Phantom came in and read, and the theater departments are so cliquey that, everybody knows everybody and everybody's jealous of everybody. It's just as bad, it's like a miniature Hollywood. And I arrived the first day of rehearsal, and there was a black marker right through my name. And I went to the director and I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Mr. Kove, you have to be in attendance at Hofstra University to be able to participate in these plays." So.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
And Jesse, you were, and by the way, there's a microphone here, so if you guys have any questions you want to ask or anything you want, feel free to line up. We'll get your questions. But Jesse, you were, so coming in, you mentioned, as a teenager coming in on that, but all along, that you were sort of brought up on set with your dad, right? Too, wasn't storytelling and just sort of movie making, and didn't you I read somewhere you were taking your G.I. Joe. I mean, probably things we did. It was just
right.
making our own little movies and things like that.
You did your homework, didn't you?
This is what I do.
G.I. Joe?
I was very lucky. I grew up on movie sets, and it was always like going to Disneyland for me. I'd rather go with him to go watch him make a movie than be in school.
Nice.
And, do homework. I remember one time he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to India and do this movie." And he's like, "Do you want to come?" I'm like, "Yeah." Miss school? Yes. And nice. So I kind of got this crash course in filmmaking from, from the ground up, in person, kind of the best way possible. I've done different acting schools and stuff, but I've always, being on set is the best acting school you can have. And it was always something that I would try and absorb like a sponge when I was there. And he never pushed me to be in the industry at all, which is understandable.
I think you even maybe didn't want him maybe at one point in the industry too, right? You were just a little cautious about him getting in.
Well, I was always, down the middle of the road because I never pushed him to do it.
Yeah.
But, there's so much rejection. It's not a normal life,
right.
But he has a strong will, and he just gravitated to it and sort of diffused through his system. And he's never had a problem with with rejection or not getting the part or whatever.
I hide it very well.
Was that the lesson? Was that almost like the acting school you didn't have, but just learning the sort of lessons of seeing things that would happen to your dad and going, okay, now I know it's heading my way?
Totally. I mean, it's a roller coaster for sure. There's highs and lows, and it's you never know what you're going to get, but it's always been, my dad's always been a dad to me, and so it's always been nice to have the balance of both worlds.
Before we talk Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, I got to go back a little bit. I want to ask you about working with Stallone, because there's a couple movies. I think Death Race 2000, and then a little bit later, Rambo 2. So working with Stallone a little bit, and then I want to ask you a little bit about your TV work.
Well, Sly and I, we knew each other in the early 70s. We had an old clockmaker who was our personal manager, and he would get us these jobs, he'd get Sly a job as an usher on 3rd Avenue at the Baronet Theater in Manhattan. He'd get me a job as a Santa Claus in Abraham and Strauss, And these were the kind of jobs that he was locked into, able to help us out with. But ultimately, we all came out to California together, and we did this movie Capone together with Ben Gazzara, which was fun, and gangster movie, and Susan Blakely. And then we did, a few months later, we did Death Race 2000.
Which is, that movie's nuts.
It's a crazy movie.
Yeah.
Baby carriages it's one of those, it was a Roger Corman movie, and those of you that know Rod, this is a fellow that made endless amount of movies, and he gave starts to people like Jonathan Demme and Francis Ford Coppola, Marty Scorsese. All these people were doing $400,000 or $500,000 movies for this producer, and this was one of them. And I remember I guess what I remember most is going into the trailer and seeing Sly hold this red script, and I said, well, what is that? He says, well, it's this boxing movie that I'm trying to get going. And so that was a year and a half before Rocky was released. So obviously, he made it, and I was doing a TV series called Code R, at the time when he was screening the movie. And he would call me and say, come to the screening, and I couldn't come. I was shooting this series. Called me twice over a period of a month. And then we never talked again. He was pissed off. We never talked again until I did Rambo 2.
Right.
Like 7 years later.
Right.
You know. But it's okay. You know, now whenever we bump into each other, there's a whole history there.
Now, in that meantime, he played Rocky. He played a boxer named Rocky. I'm going to dig into the archive a little bit here. I just want to see where we land with this. You played a boxer named Rocky in a boxing ring on a TV show with a large green behemoth.
Yes.
Okay, ringing any bells, ringing any boxing ring bells here?
Of course. It was
Okay.
Lou Ferrigno. And
Final round episode of The Incredible Hulk you were in.
And the final round was the first episode of the series.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yep.
And it was all like talking like this, and everybody talked like that. You know, it was a Rocky character, and it was written like that. And oddly enough, Sly was casting Fist at the time, this movie Fist with Norman Jewison directing. And he got wind of this episode. And it always amazed me because he was doing the movie with Universal. And it was a Universal
Television show, right?
You know, Incredible Hulk. And he ended up suing them. Because
That I didn't know.
Yeah, the character was exactly Rocky.
Yeah.
And it was
His name is
written
Rocky.
like that. And, you know, it was my biggest guest starring role at the time, 1978, 79, something like that. And it was a great part. But I remember that he did that, and he won. I don't remember the monies and all that.
Wow.
But the bottom line was, I always thought it was ironic that he was working with that studio, funding a movie.
Yeah.
And then he still sued them for something else totally disjointed. So,
Welcome to Hollywood, right?
yeah, it's very Hollywood. It's a very Hollywood story.
So that's your time with a superhero. Jesse, I want to ask you about your time as a superhero. You got to suit up as a superhero. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that came about?
I'm trying to remember which one.
It's for the Shadow.
Oh, yes. I played the Shadow, which Alec Baldwin did in the 90s, which was really fun. We got to work on that, too. That was such a fun take on the character. I really enjoyed it. I loved his whole backstory and everything. And
So you were familiar with the comic books, you were familiar with the pulp novels, and
did some of the research.
Did you dig in? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And that was really fun. I mean, playing superheroes is always an interesting, journey because, you're always trying to make it somewhat different, than the person before them, and so it's always like kind of like, you have these big shoes to fill, and it's just always, it's something you want to try out and see what you can do with it, and I enjoy it, but I always say like playing villains is kind of a little bit more fun because you have such a broad, canvas to paint and play with and go this extreme, and so that's always something fun. I think like when actors come to the plate, when they get to play villains like the Joker or something like that, there's always so much you get to try and do with it. As a superhero, you got to kind of stay in a certain lane, can't step out too far unless you're Ryan Reynolds and you save certain studios, but lightning in a bottle with that one. But it's always fun to play those characters.
Actors always want to play the villains. I mean, they always do. Well, you have one of the best of all time, as a role model. So is there a better villain than your dad in the Karate Kid series?
For someone who doesn't have superheroes, it's pretty unbelievable.
Yes. It's almost like a supervillain in something that doesn't have. First of all, how many times had you seen like Karate Kid coming in? Because I think that was right before you were born, so you wouldn't have been on set or anything like that. But like, when did you first kind of come into this knowing like that this pop cultural phenomenon that he was a part of and that Ralph Macchio was a part of and all that? When did you sort of get a realization of that?
When I was like 7, I just always remember people coming up to my dad, and Ralph and Billy are always they're longtime friends, and Billy's like an uncle, and it was always great to see people coming up to them, and the fandom and all that, and what the character meant to them. It's always been something that I've loved seeing as a kid, and but it was funny because it was always like, oh, is he really mean like that in real life? And and then I would be playing soccer, and he'd be on the field like shouting and screaming, and people would think that it was really John Kreese coming out, but it was really just my dad. And finish him, Jesse. And So it was always an interesting, part of my life and for my sister as well. But yeah.
You never screamed that for real, though, did you? That'd be cool. That'd be awesome if you did. But
I think you said finish it.
Finish it.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's gotta like freak people out around you guys too. Because then they hear
It
that.
definitely freaked. My daughter played soccer for the Beverly Hills High School, and the girls, and I didn't know. You scream in AYSO, you scream. Parents scream like constantly in alto voce and screaming for their kids. Well, in high school and college, you don't do that. You go to the games and you don't rave. My daughter would dance too much with the ball, and she wouldn't pass it off. So we had a code word called relentless. And whenever I see her dancing with the ball, I would scream, for her to pass off, I would scream relentless. But I would do it like John Kreese scream. And I go, relentless, and then I would cheer, and I wouldn't say finish him or sweep the leg or anything.
Right.
But it had the intensity of that.
Yeah.
And so one day my daughter came to me and she said, Daddy, you can't cheer anymore. I said, what do you mean? She says, you're scaring all the players. They came to me and said, can you tell your father that he doesn't need to play John Kreese now? This was right around the movie came out, and I was not playing John Kreese. I was just cheering my daughter.
Right.
But I was asked.
But you were bringing that energy into it.
Well, I couldn't bring the energy in anymore. Once she told me that, I had to be quiet.
When they were, I think it was when they were filming, was it Part 3, Karate Kid Part 3, that the main role was going to be you, but it got knocked down a little bit because you were filming a TV series at the time? Mm-hmm. Okay, can you talk a little bit about the TV series? Because this is such a high concept to me, and I actually went back and watched it, because I don't remember at the time, but I went back and watched a little bit of it. I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And it seemed like that's something that could have taken off or should have taken off.
Yeah, it should have taken off. There was something called Hard Time on Planet Earth, about an alien who comes down from the stars and has to do some good deeds in order to return as a revolutionary back up to the galaxy. And they're planning Karate Kid 3, and it's my movie. It's all written for me. There was no Terry Silver.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, my agent could not get me out of the series. And it was terrible. And I made the deal, and it was a great vehicle. It was my script. There was more of me in it than Ralph. And then the director decided he couldn't really have me come in sporadically through the piece. I needed to be there for the whole movie. So they decided to do a rewrite, and they created a character called Terry Silver, who was a Vietnam vet and with me in Vietnam. And so ultimately, there would not be a Terry Silver in Cobra Kai.
That's what I say. It was just such a full circle moment, because that ultimately it ended up working out because you guys all got to get together anyway.
I wasn't available to do it. It was heartbreaking because I felt like I was letting down John Avildsen, the director. I mean, I'm sitting in the room with Jerry Weintraub, the big producer, John Avildsen, the head of business affairs at Columbia, and the AD. And I'm in tears. I'm literally in tears because I felt that I left these people in the lurch. I get on the phone. I actually called Jeff Katzenberg, the head of Disney, and I said, can we just start? I did it right there in front of these people, and I said, can we delay the beginning of this show? Because Karate Kid 3. And he says, Marty Kove, he says, I love you in those movies. He says, but you're the only star in Hard Time on Planet Earth. We have an air date, and we've got to begin at a certain time. We can't delay. I was heartbroken. And ultimately, that's how Terry Silver got to be in Cobra Kai. And it's one of those things where it was bittersweet.
Yeah.
And yet both movies the movie didn't do as well as the other two, because you can't disenfranchise a villain you can't take Darth Vader out of Star Wars, And the series, it was a great series created by the writers of The Predator. These guys wrote The Predator, and it was a great edge to it. And yet the network cast 2 writers to write who wrote Simon and Simon and Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah.
And you're writing for a hard-edged revolutionary from the stars. So the show never really, there were lightweight episodes about dating games and, tough love, and it's silly stuff.
Well, it's like he learns about humanity from watching television, I think, as you're going through, and he starts to get all these different things, and it's almost like a Mork from Ork kind of thing, where he just like takes in from pop culture and different things like that. I hope we get it on Blu-ray at some point, because it is. Have you ever seen it, Jesse?
I have.
Okay.
We're trying to actually reboot it right now. We're
Just
get out of town.
He'd be a great Jesse. It's really funny. The character's name is
I was wondering if that inspired you to name Jesse.
Well, I always liked the name. I'm into the West, so Jesse James and all that, all those names always turn me on. In fact, Jesse, his character was it was pronounced Yessi in Hebrew, and I wanted to always name him Jesse, but you had to name, in the Jewish religion, you had to name it after your grandfather, and so I had to figure it out, and then it was okay to use the initial of my grandfather for Jesse's middle name, and then we got away with using Jesse as the first name, and I just always, I like all those biblical names, and I love all the, the outlaw names as well.
In a million years, I never thought you'd say you were going to reboot that series. So that just made me.
It was kind of ahead of its time. I mean, it was about an alien with superhuman strength and superheroes. I mean, it fits in perfectly now, and we thought it'd be great to bring it back still in the 80s because, I think
so you would be the lead?
That would be one of the choices. Yeah, we would do that, and then we obviously would love to have my dad peppered in there too, wherever character would work best, and maybe as a like a father figure or something like that. I mean, it would kind of be perfect, almost like a Stranger Things, that kind of energy, but in the 80s with aliens and all that. It would be really fun, almost like a Superman kind of character,
Because the show opens with him Terminator style, where he's dropped down from the earth butt naked.
Yep.
And I don't know, was it NBC? CBS. I don't know how it got away with it, but CBS showed butt naked in the intro. So that's how
I'm going to be even more butt naked.
More butt naked. So if it's a streaming service, then you could be more butt naked.
Straight to HBO.
Oh wow. Okay. So this is all just writing itself as it happening out. Speaking of reboots, and again, if you have any questions, jump on the mic because I could do this all day. But how surprised were you when we're bringing the Karate Kid franchise back? We're bringing Cobra Kai back. Both of you. I mean, what did you both think of that?
Well, I remember we were in the living room in the house one day, and he said, he was on the phone, and I was like, oh, what was that about? And he goes, they're doing like a Karate Kid thing on YouTube. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like a sketch thing or some prank show or something? And he was like, no, a series. And I was like, how the hell are they going to do that? And, putting movies and YouTube together, I mean, he was just as surprised as I was. And then, obviously they sent him the scripts and he got into it, and it was really kind of a beautiful rollout of what we see today. And it was genius. I mean, he was just as surprised. I mean, it was really, really a wild story.
Yeah.
They confessed when they first came to me. It was in a restaurant in Beverly Hills, and 3 of the writers who are totally responsible for the success of the show, Hayden Schlossberg, John
Hurwitz and Josh Heald.
John Hurwitz and Josh Heald. And they came to me, and they admitted on this podcast that I did with Jesse and Rachel. We used to have a podcast.
Yeah, Kicking It with the Coves.
Yeah, Kicking It with the Coves. And they told me this story. This is 4 years after we made this. I had dinner with them, and they said, we want you to come in episode 10, season 1, and you're going to set up season 2. And I said, but why can't I come in earlier? And they said, no, you're going to set up season 2. They confessed 4 years later that they were truly afraid to tell me that because they thought I kicked their ass in the restaurant. They literally...
This is PTSD from your Karate Kid 3 experience.
Unbelievable. That they thought, 4 mature adults, 3 of them
Wow.
were just really, really nervous to say, because they knew my reaction. I would want to come in earlier, and they wanted to set up season 2, and they did. It was a great setup for season 2. But I couldn't imagine these 3 characters really being very nervous and frightened of the guy's image from the previous movies.
Wow.
And they admitted that on the air, which I thought was hysterical.
Yeah. Well, you're really good at that villain thing. I mean,
I cry at supermarket openings,
Well, yeah, right. But we don't see that part. Let's close out with some fan questions. Yep.
So I have a 2-part question. So first off, what was it like when you first got the call for Cobra Kai? Was it something you expected at all, or was it like more of a, I did Karate Kid a long time ago, I'm all set with this?
Well, when at this meeting that we were talking about, I thought about what I told them that I wanted to play the character unlike the Karate Kid character. I wanted to play him with more vulnerability, more colors, flashbacks. In fact, Jesse was in the show, which had the first flashback of, he plays a bully and he bullies me as a busboy. And then there's an army flashback later on showing why John Kreese is the way he is. So when I asked for that, they said, we'll do that. We'll do flashbacks, we'll do backstories, and also it gives the character more colors and vulnerability and all. And I've had that all the way through. And what you'll see in the coming season, part 2 and part 3, there's a lot of that. It's very exciting. It's very exciting the way it's written. So that was my main concern. And I won that battle because these writers were a year ahead of you as the actor. They were more developed. They knew everything about your character a year before it was on the page, and that's fantastic,
That's really neat. And then my second part of the question is, did you prefer playing Kreese way earlier in Karate Kid, or did you prefer playing him in Cobra Kai?
No, Cobra Kai. Kreese was, I don't know where the venom came from of the Karate Kid 1, because it just rose up, and he was one color through the whole game. I watched it many times in Atlanta shooting the series, and I would try to see the different moods. And then I'd fast forward to all my scenes, and he never changed. He wasn't happy if the kids won. He wasn't happy if his team lost. He was, it was like whatever I was playing, it was interesting, and it was moment by moment. And, and they loved it. John loved it. John Avildsen directed Rocky and God knows other things. And they loved that performance. For me, it was really just like another heavy. Mm-hmm. I didn't approach it really differently. I approached Cobra Kai differently, but I never really got into backstories a little bit, not much. In Cobra Kai, backstory for every episode,
Go ahead, next.
Were there ever any times on either the original films or in the series of Cobra Kai where things got heated and anybody wanted to bust out some moves?
You mean where we disagree?
Yeah, arguments, disagreements, anything that could have led to an altercation, or
I remember a time you were telling me about there was during I think it was season 5 where you were doing all the All Valley, where you guys were standing around for 12 hours a day. He was so annoyed that he was like, I'd call him and be like, well, how's it going today, Dad? Who's winning? Who's doing what? And he would like, we are just standing around for 12 hours a day. My feet are killing me, and they were shooting things very slowly. And I remember you were like, I think you went to like Josh or something, and you're like, what's next? What are we doing? Like, I need to sit down for a minute. We've been standing for 8 hours.
It was a tournament scene in the end of season 4, and it was so hot, and we were shooting in Jacksonville, and it was so hot, and yet we're indoors, and it was still hot, and we're standing around watching. That's all we did.
They had to just get them in the background watching them shoot. So they didn't have any dialogue. It's literally just them like this all day long.
Hour
nodding.
after hour, just trying to find what to do with your hands. Put them in here, do this, and we're not used to that because we're, principals, so you're used to having an activity in a scene. 8 hours, next day, 8 hours, and I got crazy. And I went to the director and I said, happened to be one of the writers, and I said, why do we need to stand there for so many hours? And he says, it's a 360-degree shot all the time because they were watching the kids fight. And I was so upset, and so was Thomas Ian Griffith, who played Terry Silver, because we had to stand together. And sometimes we like each other and sometimes we don't. So it was kind of, it was very interesting. But we've never it's never gotten to fisticuffs it was no divas on our show. I remember, being, I think the first on Cagney Lacey when I did it, I remember getting into a real bout with a wonderful director named Ray Danton. And he apologized later on, but that was with the director. That was like 20 years earlier. But sometimes it happens. It happens when people step on your lines. That's when it happens the worst.
We're going to speed run on these next two because we got another panel coming in, so we got two real quick questions.
This question from my niece is question for me. My nieces, they said, who was your favorite person on Karate Kid to work with?
Favorite person on Karate Kid to work with?
Oh, yeah.
So good. Tell
It's for you, for him, yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Well, I meant the whole thing. In the movie itself?
Yeah.
Well, Billy and I had, really a lot of, we've been doing cinematic interpretations with each other since 1984. So we've had a relationship cinematically for the last 40 years. So people love to watch us react to one another. And we don't even have to have lines. We can just have everybody envisions the histrionics that have gone on between these two characters since 1984 all the way to now. And I guess my richest moments have always been playing with Billy, very emotional, and especially coming up in these, final 10 episodes, very emotional stuff, And I think that, I like playing off of him. When I play with Ralph, it's interesting too. But I think Tori and Johnny, very emotional scenes, and I sort of tend to like the real emotional, vulnerable colors to play rather than tough guy.
And the
We're going to do a real quick hit because we got to wrap up. Yep, last question here.
Kreese would.
Right. We're going to do a quick hit.
I just have a statement that I actually work at Hofstra University in the public relations office, and I work in the drama department all the time, and it makes me really sad to hear that you came in to audition for plays and wasn't
That's unbelievable.
That's just wonderful.
It's a great way to end it.
So on behalf of Hofstra University, please come back.
Audition, you need audition again.
Invitation.
I would say that's fantastic. That's really, because, one time I called my old junior high. It was like a similar thing. I called my old junior high to do a bullying deal in this, and the head guidance counselor said to me, "You don't really want to come here, Mr. Kove." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, it's not the school that you remember. We had to do away with auditorium, congregations and all that because of the fighting." So I was like rejected from wanting to go to a bullying seminar at the school. Wow. And here, I think about that a lot because George Bernard Shaw, I got the lead, and Hector Hushabye was his name, and of all the schools that I wanted to do a play in, Hofstra had a great drama department.
Yeah, yep.
And they said no.
Yeah.
And so now I would love to go back there.
Okay.
Folks, let's hear it from Martin and Jessie Kove. They're going to be here all weekend. Thank you, gents.
Thank you guys so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you. You've done your homework, man.
You got to come by the table and we got to get a picture with you. That's crazy.
That video was delicious. And good for you, too. I know, I'm a doctor. And I'm also poor, which is hilariously funny because you'll never see a poor doctor. Trust me and subscribe already. Have fun and eat another video.